And Tucker Carlson kind of summed it up. He said, I'm all in on Donald Trump unless he picks Nikki Haley. And then he said she would literally be poison to his campaign. And so, like you say, they're finding who
I'm in the
is
same
next
camp.
person
I mean,
they
I've
can
said
control.
exactly. I've said the same thing. I mean,
Okay, I have with me presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek, thank you so much for coming on the show again.
it's good to be here, man.
Man, you are making time for as many people as you can. You guys are in a blizzard in Iowa, and yet you've been able to make every single event. That's so incredible.
I got here to the apartment in Des Moines at 2:30 a.m. last night, and I was up at 6:30 a.m. today. Unless there's literally an instance where you cannot enter a town, which is one that came up this morning. Other than that, we're doing all the events. And, I'm the only candidate today that's doing multiple events today in the middle of this. I think if these Iowans are coming out to see me, who am I to say I'm not going to show up and keep my commitments to see them? Sometimes I think, I think one of the things of discipline for me is if you keep remembering who you're reporting to, allocate your time accordingly. Problem with these politicians is they spend too much time on the donor calls. I'm not doing any of those now. I'm done with that nonsense. I'm focusing on reporting to the voters, and it starts with these caucus goers here in Iowa.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to talk with you about the Supreme Court's decision to take up the Donald Trump being removed from the Colorado ballot. What are your thoughts on the situation, the Supreme Court, and Democrats fighting to remove Donald Trump?
So this should be a layup of a case for the Supreme Court, barring something unexpected happening. But the fact that it even got here shows that there's something deeper going on here. And I think that's what we have to open our eyes to, right? There's the whack-a-mole defensive position of you could take a look at the New York case and the first federal prosecution, the second federal prosecution, the Georgia case, and then the civil cases. And then now you got even the extrajudicial means of removing him from a ballot. In one case, just because one individual in Maine woke up on the wrong side of a bed one day and decided to remove him. I mean, that's one off. We can play whack-a-mole there. And I think the Supreme Court's probably going to set this right. But the deeper point is we got to open our eyes. This is all just in 2023. This system heading into 2024 has decided one way or another, by hell or high water, they will not let Donald Trump get anywhere near the White House. I want people to open their eyes. I think that they are leading us into a trap. The clues are clear as day. And I think we're going to look back a year from now. We're not going to say that we were shocked when that happened. We're going to say, what the heck were we thinking that we allowed that to happen for our movement? So the way I look at this is they're effectively selling us the rope today they're going to use to hang us tomorrow. I'm going to make it clear what they're doing. They want to narrow this down between Trump and a puppet who they can control. I initially thought it was a Democrat. I'm increasingly certain it's a Republican by the name of Nikki Haley. They're trying to narrow this down to a two-horse race between Trump and a puppet they can control, eliminate Trump from contention sometime this spring, maybe early summer, trot in their puppet to the White House. That's what's going on right now. It's hiding in plain sight. It's up to us to open our eyes and actually see that game and not be fooled. We cannot fall for that trap. And so do I hope and expect the Supreme Court is going to get this one right? Yes. But is this just another symptom of, I think, a unfortunately unstoppable force or seemingly unstoppable force, not just from the prosecutorial state, but from a system that I think will stop at nothing. And I'm increasingly convinced it will be stopping at nothing to keep this man away from the White House. I think it's going to take us not falling into that trap to keep our movement alive. America First didn't begin in 2016. It started in 1776, and we owe it to our founding fathers to make sure that it doesn't end with Donald Trump. And that's why I'm in this race.
Right. Well, and for those of my viewers that don't know, you did something incredibly honorable. When Trump was removed from the Colorado and Maine ballot, you were the first one to come out in his defense. You were the first one to say, if he can't be on there, I'm removing my own name. Meanwhile, you have Ron DeSantis saying, I'm not removing my name. I'm not getting caught up in this. Nikki Haley, I'm not going to remove my name. Why are they not willing to fight the fight with the American people?
So at every step of this process, I have stood steadfastly for Donald Trump and against this persecution. I was actually at the Miami courthouse with that first indictment that came down. That was the Miami courthouse down there. I've even filed FOIA lawsuits, FOIA-based demands and litigation associated with it against the Biden DOJ, demanding what Biden told Jack Smith, what Merrick Garland told Jack Smith. I've gone to the fullest extent possible at every step. When they said they would remove Trump from those ballots, I said I would voluntarily remove myself from any ballot in which Trump was also removed, and called on every other Republican to do the same thing, because that's how we nullify the impact of election interference in our GOP primary. Not one of the other puppets, I don't even call them candidates, not one of the other puppets, that's what they are, stepped up to do it, because they said they wanted to collect their delegates, which I think reflects complicity in the GOP in this plot to effectively keep Donald Trump nowhere near Washington, D.C. or the White House again. And so I think it's sad. It's wrong what's happening in this country. I think that we all have a duty to ask ourselves what we're actually going to do about it. We have an election this year. I think that those who think that this is just going to be a honky-dory, hey, it's two teams competing in a friendly way, that at the end of the day is going to have a fairly refereed game or whatever. I'll remind you what happened in 2020 with a man-made pandemic in a lab in Wuhan, using our taxpayer dollars to do it, a tech-rigged election just leading up to the process, let alone the election itself. This time they will stop at nothing. And I think it's important for us not to fast forward a year from now and regret the fact that we walked straight into it, which is what I worry I'm seeing hiding in plain sight.
Gotcha. Now that's a really interesting perspective. I appreciate you pointing that out. One perspective that I wanted to point out is, Ron DeSantis walked into this thinking he was going to just steamroll all the other GOP candidates, including Donald Trump. He was going to take on the alpha male. I think since then he's shot himself in the foot with the American people. And now it seems like the corporate donor class, the military industrial complex, more and more, they're backing Nikki Haley. Setting Trump aside, what makes you different from Nikki Haley?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a fundamental divide in American politics, what Nikki Haley represents versus what I represent. So that's, in some ways an amusing question to me. She represents everything that's wrong with American politics. In some ways, she represents why I need to be in American politics. She's an example of a politician who consistently makes money off of advancing policies that don't advance American interests. The embodiment of America Last, cut Social Security benefits to ship and fork $200 billion more of our own taxpayer money to kleptocrats in Ukraine, while she leaves the UN mired in family debt. And then what happens is she becomes a military contractor, joins the board of Boeing, gives secretive speeches to foreign actors, worse than Hillary Clinton, suddenly emerges from that a multimillionaire, just like Joe Biden, just like Hillary Clinton. It's corrupt. And it's wrong when Republicans do it. It's wrong when Democrats do it. But Nikki Haley is just the latest vestige of the old Dick Cheney version of the Republican Party, fighting foreign wars, failing to advance our own interests, that needs to be relegated to the dustbins of history. And on the debate stage, I revealed that it's not only a financial fraud element to this. People like this are an intellectual fraud. She's fighting, clamoring, more even than the Biden administration, to fork more money to Ukraine. Yet on that debate stage, she couldn't even name 3 of the provinces in eastern Ukraine that she wants us to be fighting for to send $200 billion of our money to go defend. And so I reject that vision of the Republican Party. She's somebody who doesn't believe in the Constitution. The difference between me and Nikki Haley is when I'm going to swear an oath to the Constitution, I actually know what it says. She wants to require government-issued ID for any person using a social media profile or any person even using the internet. Think about this. Jack Smith, in his disastrous prosecution of Donald Trump, in one of those indictments, in one of those investigations, has issued a subpoena for anybody who dared to hit like or retweet on one of Donald Trump's posts. Now imagine your own government-issued ID has to be tied to that. Bring a central bank digital currency along, and what do you know? You have an Orwellian state that's far worse than even what Biden's putting up in the guise of a Republican. And that's why I think the plot is really, that's the puppet they're trying to trot in. I had a good feeling it wasn't going to be Trump versus Biden. I had that for a while. I think the breadcrumbs had been dropped there. I thought it was going to be Gavin or Michelle Obama or whoever it is. Actually, the puppet they really want is Nikki Haley. It allows them to claim that they're not leftists, but you got the likes of Reid Hoffman. He's paying for the lawsuits against Donald Trump, including, I believe, some of those to keep him off the ballot. Larry Fink, the king of the woke industrial complex, CEO of BlackRock, backing Nikki Haley as well, showing up at fundraisers in New York City for her. The people they're actually propping up, they're not propping up Joe Biden. They're propping up Nikki Haley. And so I think that this game is far more devious than what meets the eye. And again, I think that that trap is hiding in plain sight. It is up to us to not walk into it. And whether they do that by narrowing this to a 2-horse race between Nikki and Donald Trump to eliminate Trump and trot Nikki in, or whether it's to dupe Donald Trump and to get Nikki Haley as a vice president or whatever game they want to play. Be Dick Cheney all over again is what they expect. I can tell you clearly, nobody like Nikki Haley is going to be my vice president. Nobody like Nikki Haley or John Bolton or Lindsey Graham or Karl Rove is coming anywhere near my administration. And that's what's going to be required to actually have a leader that takes our America First agenda to the next level. Having the right vision is half the battle and the ability to execute. But you can't staff your administration or your vice presidency with people that fit that description. And so I'm happy to say, at least for my part, I can't speak for others, but for my part, I can give you clarity that nobody like that's going to be in my administration. Let's relegate the neocon dogma that has poisoned our country, the neoliberal neocon, they're two sides of the same coin, to the past and move to a future where we have leaders in this country who actually advance the citizens of our own nation's interests, not somebody else's.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the American people have a similar feeling to what you've just expressed. And Tucker Carlson kind of summed it up. He said, I'm all in on Donald Trump unless he picks Nikki Haley. And then he said she would literally be poison to his campaign. And so, like you say, they're finding who
I'm in the same camp. I mean, I've said
control.
Exactly. I've said the same thing. I mean, if Donald Trump's the nominee, I'm running to be the nominee, and I hope and expect to be. And if I am, I expect his support. But if Donald Trump is the nominee, he has my full support. But that's conditioned on something. I mean, it wouldn't even be the same person to think that that person would put Nikki Haley in his administration or in a vice presidency. So I'm with Tucker on that one. Zero chance. In fact, I think it's our obligation as patriots to oppose putting up. I don't care if they have an R after their name or not. If it's Dick Cheney or Nikki Haley, none of those people should be eligible to be a vice president of an America First candidate. That means you're not an America First candidate.
Yeah. Well, you are an America First candidate, and people like that about you. What would you do? I know you've been a big fan of Donald Trump. What would you do to carry on his legacy, but also build on his legacy?
Well, first thing is I got to respect his legacy. I mean, everybody else in this race irritates the hell out of me. This is the Ron DeSantis problem, and it's everybody else in this race too. They've been licking the guy's boots for years for money and endorsements. Now, when things go convenient for them, Monday morning quarterbacking some decision he made. So yeah, do I agree with every single decision Donald Trump made? Of course not. All right, you could go back and Monday morning quarterback a lot of things that good conservatives might have done differently, but we weren't in his seat. And so I'm not lazy in playing that game as the media tries to bait me to do, as the other candidates are pathetically now flocking to do. I'm not doing that. I'm going to respect his legacy. I agree with 90% of what he did for this country. Nobody's perfect. Reagan made some mistakes. Trump isn't perfect either, but he's the best president we've had, probably in my lifetime, certainly since Reagan, and definitely in the 21st century. However, we're going to build on that legacy now and take our America First agenda further. I'm not just going to put Betsy DeVos on top of the Department of Education. I'm going to shut it down and return $80 billion of taxpayer money back to the people, including the parents who deserve to choose where they send their kids to school. I'm not going to build the FBI a new building. I'm not even going to just say I'll replace Christopher Wray. I'm going to shut the whole thing down. And we have a clear plan to do it. The failed Bureau of Investigation, it's got 35,000 employees. 20,000 of them are back office bureaucrats in that J. Edgar Hoover building of the FBI. We're going to send them packing. 15,000 of them are agents on the front lines. I'm going to move them to places like the U.S. Marshals, which have been far more effective at fighting child sex trafficking rings or fentanyl in this country. Move them to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network to go after the future SBFs and FTXs of the world. That's actually increasing effectiveness, but while also gutting the corruption. And it is a myth to say that you can just fire Christopher Wray or something like this to make it happen. It's the machine, the Leviathan, that's actually the problem. And so it takes a leader who understands that to respect Trump's legacy, to take it forward. I give Trump credit. He rolled that log over in that swamp, and we saw what crawled out. I'm bringing the pesticide. And I do think it's going to take somebody who not only comes from the outside as a businessman who can break things, and Trump brought that, and I bring that too. But it's also going to take somebody who knows and deeply understands the Constitution. Without that, they'll dupe you. They'll say you can't shut down those agencies. You can't fire those bureaucrats, those civil servants because of civil service protections. BS. Read the law. You actually can if it's in the context of mass firings. And so those two things don't usually go together, right? The business guy, the entrepreneur who can execute, but then the legal academic guy who understands the law. And I think in our next president, now in 2024, we need somebody who has both of those things to make sure we can get the job done, but also not be duped by that same swamp into saying, here's all the things you can't do. I'm not in this to just expose the problem anymore. I'm in this to eradicate it. And that's what I'm going to do as the next president.
Great. Well, that's exciting. I know you have to leave in a snowstorm right now to keep your obligations to the people of Iowa and the people of the United States of America. I wish you luck. Thank you again for giving our show time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for doing what you do, man. Take it easy. We'll talk soon.